Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of No Timeouts. Yes, 3 games left in the season. Some would say the most important time of the year. We're in the frigid temperatures of downtown Toronto, and our host, Jonah Birnbaum, at an undisclosed location, left us high and dry, catching some rays. We're going to power through. He's put me in this spot, a very difficult one. I'm Tyler MacKillop. That's Dan Wilkins, Zak McDonald, and Justin Boone. Gentlemen, the divisional round lived up to the hype. It was fantastic. We'll get to some of the ramifications from those games, but I want to start with these conference championship games. And most importantly, we'll start with this. What matchup are you most excited or most interested in seeing in the Super Bowl? Dan, I'll start with you.
I think I said this a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was on my Christmas wish list, but I only want the heavyweight matchups. Just no disrespect to the Commanders. I just want the big guns in the final. So give me the Eagles out of the NFC, and you know, of course, the Chiefs qualify, but I'm sick of them, so give me the Bills. Give me Bills, Eagles, and it would be a fun Super Bowl.
Are you any
Well,
different, Zach?
I feel the same way, but I want the Chiefs. Give me the Chiefs. Like I know it's like it's obviously really like I won't be upset if I'll be upset if the Bills make the Super Bowl and lose. That will suck. If they won the Super Bowl, that would
You
be.
think you'll be upset?
Yeah. 5th Super Bowl loss. But if they win it, that would be awesome. But I want to see the Chiefs. I want to see the three-peat. I'm into watching football for greatness. I want to see greatness. The Eagles are clearly the greatest team in the NFC. The Chiefs are one of the greatest teams of all time, and they might be the greatest team of all time if they can win one more Super Bowl.
I mean, I'm surprised that everyone didn't say the exact same thing here, which is it's obvious everyone wants Bills Commanders, don't they? What are you guys talking about? Nobody wants to see the Chiefs do it again. We want to see a rivalry get lifted to a new level. And Bills Chiefs hasn't really been the rivalry that it could be because the Bills haven't beat them in the playoffs. If the Bills beat them in the playoffs, now we have this more exciting Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen battle that can continue for years to come. And there'd be a little history there, right? Like the Bills and the Commanders, they weren't the Commanders back then, but they played Washington in the Super Bowl back in 1992. And of course, Washington won that one. So let's see the Bills get there. My Bills, of course, I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is an incredibly biased opinion that we have
It
going
would
on
be
here.
so fun. I want to see some fresh faces in the Super Bowl. I want to see the Bills finally get over the hump and get there and maybe get some revenge on Washington after they lost all those years ago. So I think that would be the most fun, on top of the fact that we would get to talk about Jaden Daniels and the Commanders and that whole story, which is just fantastic. So I think the vast majority of people out there want to see Bills Commanders.
I will say selfishly, I'm going to be in New Orleans for the Super Bowl week, and I would love to see the clash of Eagles fans and Bills fans coming together for a weekend. That would
be
are some crazy
insane.
But let's start with the AFC Championship game. So divisional round, we saw, did all of the losers or all of the winners of those games lose the yardage battle? So there was a lot of interesting results from those games. I want to start with, in the AFC Championship game, is there anything changed for you the way you think about these two teams going into this AFC Championship game? Boone, I will start with your Bills about how the divisional round takes you into the conference championship game and how you feel about them.
Not much changed. I was worried, like I said last week, going into that game against the Ravens. One of the biggest surprises for me, and I talked about it a few weeks ago when we were discussing, reasons that we might think some of these top teams won't get all the way to the Super Bowl. And one of the things I brought up with the Bills was they had that incredible turnover differential during the season, just this astronomical plus 24. We hadn't seen a team go plus 20 or higher in like 5 or 6 years. And I thought, okay, we're getting to the playoffs. All you need is one bad game where that finally kind of regresses a little bit. And it hasn't yet. They got 3 really big turnovers against the Ravens offense. They haven't turned the ball over themselves through 2 playoff games. I really want to knock on some wood. Let's hope that this isn't the week that it happens. But the fact that they're continuing to do that the defense is making plays, making big plays, and making plays when it matters most, that's been fantastic. The one thing that I am a little bit concerned about is some injuries that they have now coming out of that game. Matt Milano missed a few plays at the end. He was limited in practice yesterday with a hamstring issue. Seems like he should be able to play, but we're going to have to watch that one throughout the week. Christian Benford, he's in concussion protocol. I think he was limited in practice yesterday, so that's a good start to the week. Sometimes it can be tough, though, to get cleared within a week. And then also Taylor Rapp, that might be the one where he could potentially miss this game. I think it's a back issue for him, and they're calling him day-to-day, and I don't think he practiced yesterday. So those would be big if those guys miss the game, if they're limited in any way. The last time that these two teams played, the Chiefs also were missing some guys that they're going to have back now. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup. And I'm trying not to get too excited. I told you guys what it's like being a Bills fan, how whether it's one game or one season or one playoff run, how they just convince you little by little to start to buy in. Yep. And I'm at that point now. I'm trying to hold back. But yeah, those are the things coming out of that game that I'm paying the most attention to.
I'm glad that you mentioned the turnover battle, because for me, the biggest thing about this Bills playoff run is just the growth of Josh Allen. Like, we mentioned it earlier this season when we were talking about Anthony Richardson, just because that's the way he started his career, right? Like, it was bad. It wasn't looking good. He wasn't really an exciting first-round pick for a lot of people. I believe a lot of Bills fans were upset with the first-round pick because he just seemed like a chaotic player, was inaccurate, whatever. Any like criticism that you could have of him coming out of Wyoming seemed valid at the time, and through his first year and a half, it was kind of sticking. But then the tide started to turn a bit. He started to rein in that like chaotic gene in his game. I mean, we even saw like it almost came out again last game where he got stuffed on the sneak and kind of thought about pitching it. Fortunately, he didn't. But that's kind of what I'm talking about is, over the years, he's kind of reined that in, become a more refined player, become a more just better with ball security. He knows when to take his shots. He doesn't force the ball into dangerous situations. And this team just doesn't make mistakes now. And a big part of that is Josh Allen. And, I was big on the Ravens heading into last week's game because I saw them as the best team in football. I don't take back that take at all, but the Bills just won the turnover battle. They allowed the Ravens to make mistakes, and the Bills didn't do it, and that's what gives them a chance to go all the way this year.
And you talk about the growth of Josh Allen, and this will be the ultimate test of the growth of Josh Allen, because the difference, I think, between Mahomes and then you have kind of that second tier of quarterbacks with like Allen, Burrow, and Jackson is Mahomes can change speeds. And I think that's what Josh Allen is going to have to do in the AFC Championship. The Chiefs are going to play great defense. Spags is going to call a great defense. And Josh Allen might have to try and figure out how to win a 20-18 game rather than a 35-34 game. And that's going to be the key to them if they're going to be able to do that. Because on the other side that Mahomes can do that. Whatever kind of game, that's kind of how I think about these games a lot of times. Like, what games can I imagine this team winning? It's like a shootout. I can imagine the Bills winning a shootout. A defensive struggle, low scoring, hold on to the ball, make a play in the last minute. I don't know if I can see the Bills winning a game like that because we just haven't seen it. So if we can see it, then it'll say a lot about Josh Allen and it'll give high hopes for the Super Bowl.
I will say I was really surprised at how well they ran the ball against Baltimore. I thought that was going to be a huge problem, and they didn't really take their usual identity of the deep ball. Like, they were very, they were a little conservative in the second half, but it was good enough to win. What about from Kansas City, Zach? I feel like when you look at that game last week, they completed, one pass to a wide receiver. They just leaned on Travis Kelce, their backs, and their other tight end group. Is there anything that changes your mind about Kansas City going to this game that you learned from last week?
Well, I think something that's often overlooked, we talk about those first round buys, and I don't think the first round buy advantage comes in the divisional round because you're getting back into gear, you're working things in, especially for the Chiefs. They're bringing a lot of guys back from injuries, Hollywood Brown, all these kind of figuring out all these pieces. I think the real advantage of the buy comes in the AFC Championship because now those guys had the 2 weeks off. They get 1 week where they get to play, and now they're cooking back at full speed again. So I think you're going to see the best version of the Chiefs coming into this game, and I have no concerns about them. They've won 2 Super Bowls in a row. They're incredible. Travis Kelce is ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I said that last week. I said Travis Kelce would turn back the clock. Before I ask you guys who you guys have, I want to know if we make anything of the Mahomes, as they said, antics from last week, Dan.
Well, just to be clear, I wouldn't call them antics. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a storyline that they're getting these like crucial calls, and it creates these like fan conspiracy theories where, the NFL supporters think that the Chiefs are getting favorable calls from the league because everyone wants Mahomes to win. Obviously, that is not happening. It's ridiculous. I hate that we even have to talk about it. But to me, it's just
thank you for saying that.
More of a symptom of bad officiating. Refs are bad at their jobs. I mean, it's a difficult job, to be fair, but they make a lot of mistakes. It happens. The only way for the NFL to get on the other side of this is to use the technology they have, replay assist, or, just the ability to look at these penalties when they're called and make sure that it's actually the right call. I think that oftentimes they just default to not changing anything or not using the technology to the fullest extent of its abilities. And, it opens the door for conversations like this, which I don't think are good for business. So, no, I don't think there are any grand conspiracies to get the Chiefs to another Super Bowl. Yep. To your point, yes, maybe Mahomes knows that he can, just wait before ducking out of bounds and get a call, or
that's what I was gonna say.
Or duck down before two guys come and hit him, even though they kind of hit each other instead of him. But
this is not going to be a popular opinion, but I give credit to Mahomes for what he's doing with his supposed antics. He has recognized a loophole in the rules, and he is taking advantage of that loophole. And that is just a huge part of football. It's how Bill Belichick was successful for 300 years being a head coach. It's part of the game, and he's exploiting it. It's on the NFL to fix the rules in the offseason, which I think needs to be done. But I think Mahomes is doing the right thing.
I mean, nobody wants to see it become like the other football, like soccer, where, guys are just taking these massive dives. And we're getting pretty close to that a little bit. I mean, the NBA deals with that problem too. But speaking of the NBA, I think part of this is just superstars get calls. Like Michael Jordan used to get some wild calls in his favor, right? And it's because he's Michael Jordan and everyone gives him the benefit of the doubt. And some of that is what's happening with Mahomes too, though. Man, that one on the sidelines, he was definitely trying very, very hard to get that call.
Yeah, it's just those rules of protecting the quarterback, and Mahomes puts himself in situations where he's very obviously not trying to protect himself. Instead of running out of bounds, he's going to the middle of the field, getting behind his blockers. That's more of the thing, I guess, for me that I have a bit of a issue with.
And these rules were made up when the quarterbacks were statues in the pocket to protect those guys, and the NFL's not like that anymore. Yeah. The vast majority of quarterbacks are mobile quarterbacks, and it's time to change the rules in order to adjust to a new speed of the game.
And I think what people get mad at a lot is when you have quarterbacks like a Cam Newton or like a Josh Allen, where they kind of invite contact quite a bit. They just don't seem to get as many of those calls because of the style of runner they are, where if you act a little more frail, even if you aren't, but if you act a little more frail, the refs are just going to lean in your favor.
Yeah. All right, let's keep things moving. We'll close it with this. I want to know who you guys have in this game.
Go ahead.
Bills.
How about those Chiefs, baby?
Come on. No, I'm going Bills, of course. Like I said, I think it's a mistake, but still, I've hedged quite a bit over the last couple weeks and really over the whole season when it comes to this Bills team. I didn't want to get my hopes up. I didn't want to buy in, but after what we've seen this year and after what we've seen recently, this is the best version of the Bills team that's gone into one of these playoff matchups against the Chiefs. That doesn't mean that they're going to slay the dragon, but I think this is the best chance they have to do it.
Yeah, I was going around this week. 10 games, they're 5-5, same points for, same points against. It's been very tight, just not in the postseason. The Bills have a chance to turn that around. Okay, NFC Championship game. You mentioned Jaden Daniels earlier. Do you think Jaden Daniels is capable of putting together the performance against Detroit on the road that he has here, going outside of the indoor environment and going on the road to Philadelphia?
Yeah, I definitely think he does. I mean, it's cool that this is a divisional matchup, so we got to see it twice. And it was kind of weird a little bit because the first matchup, he didn't play very well, but that was kind of around the time mid-season when he was dealing with the rib issue, and he wasn't really as effective as a runner. He had a few down games there, so that game wasn't great. The next time these two teams played, he had a big game. And yes, Jalen Hurts got injured in that game, but to see Daniels go out in that game and have 5 passing touchdowns, to have 81 rushing yards, yes, he can come through. And we've seen this happen before where these superstar rookie quarterbacks come into the league and they lead their team, they lift everybody up, and they get them a lot further than anyone expected. And that's what we're seeing happen right now. And I definitely think that Jaden Daniels can keep this up, even though all props to the Eagles defense, they are a fantastic unit.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have a tougher time against the Eagles defense personally. I think that they just have so much more talent than the Commanders offense does, especially in the trenches. I think that there's a chance that the Eagles defense bullies them a little bit, but Daniels has been incredible, and to me it's just he's operating so well on time and just working through his reads and really maximizing the passing game. But when there's nothing there, he's already one of the best scramblers in the league. Like, as soon as the play breaks down, it's almost a guarantee that he's going to run for a first down. It's insane.
Yeah, he didn't use his legs too much last week. Probably didn't need to be. They're protecting a big lead, but man, he's just he's an unflappable player, to be honest. What about the other side of the ball? So Jalen Hurts' injury is obviously a storyline, but we saw Jahmyr Gibbs run the ball wild on this Commanders defense. How impactful is Hurts' injury in this particular matchup?
I think it does matter. I mean, it's not that he's not going to play. He is going to play. It's more of a question of how much it impacts him on the field. And I do think that is a legitimate concern for the Eagles. Probably the only concern I have for this team heading into this game. I mean, mobility is such a big part of his game. He's had, not a great year as a passer. There's been some issues for pretty extended stretches of the season. I don't know if it's maybe not a great fit with the new scheme, but it seems like at times he's pretty tentative in the pocket, just indecisive, doesn't really trust what he's seeing out there. And the mobility just is such a big thing for him because kind of like Hurts, if he doesn't trust what he sees or he doesn't, there's nothing open, he can take off and get that first down that not a lot of other guys can do. So if that goes away, I think it totally changes the Eagles' passing offense, just kind of makes it just not as good of a unit, definitely not as reliable of a unit. But to your point, I don't know that it's going to totally matter that much in this particular matchup. The Commanders' run defense is extremely bad. I know they got by Detroit last week, but they gave up 7.5 yards per carry to Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Saquon Barkley's going to have another huge game as he has all season long. And I don't know. If the Eagles jump out to an early lead and they create a game script where they can lean on the run game throughout, I think they're probably going to cruise to another NFC title and a Super Bowl spot. But if things get a little weird in the first half and they find themselves in a position where they have to put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hand when he's banged up and he can't escape the pocket when a play breaks down, that's when I think things could get interesting. But
Zach, do you think that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith will play big roles in this game? Because A.J. Brown did not have too exciting of a week last week.
No, and I don't think that they will again. I think, like you said, I don't think that Jalen Hurts is just this super dynamic passer, and I think the injury is going to help onto that, and they'll lean into the run game, and they'll try and dominate with Saquon Barkley that they did. But the thing that I kind of think is interesting about this is such a take that I would have. It has nothing really to do with reality, but it's just like an ethos in my mind. But it's like the Eagles are kind of like fueled by hate, They're perfect for their fans. It's like the players kind of hate Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni kind of hates the players. They've got like Big Dom weirdly rolling around. A.J. Brown hates Jalen Hurts. It's like their whole team is just filled with just rage and just weirdness. And I think like Jalen Hurts being injured adds to that in a way that he comes into the game a little bit pissed off and they play kind of pissed off and they're going to go out there and I think they're going to absolutely bully the Commanders and they're the most physical team in the playoffs to me. They got all these guys on defense from Georgia that are just physical freaks that play angry. The fans everything's angry. And I think that kind of angry football is something that the Commanders are not ready for. It's something that, I would have liked to see more angry football from like the Lions or the Vikings earlier in the playoffs, who kind of had these like great regular seasons and the vibes were all high. And it's like, let's get a little muddy. Let's play some dirty, angry football.
I don't know, man. The anger, the dark side, it didn't win in Star Wars, right? That leads you down the wrong path, right?
Hey, they knocked out a couple planets, though. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. But
I haven't seen Star Wars.
Yeah.
Add it to the list of movies that Wilkie hasn't seen.
Okay, who do we have in this game, Boone? I'll start with you.
I think this one is going to be closer than I guess you guys think. I think I agree with a lot of the points you guys made and the Eagles' ability to run the ball on them and everything, but I think Jaden Daniels is going to be up to the task. I think he's going to keep pace with them. I think it's going to be a lot closer than even the Vegas odds makers think. And in a very close game at the end, give me the superstar rookie quarterback. Give me Jaden Daniels to be the guy who, like you said, is unflappable and is going to make the plays when it matters at the end and is going to get them over the top in a close one.
Love that. I'm going with the Angry Birds. Give me the Angry Birds all the way.
I'll go directly opposite Boone. I do not think it's going to be close. I love Jaden Daniels, but the Eagles just are so much better.
I'm kind of with you there too. All right, last week we did this exercise where we talked about the postmortem for a lot of these teams. Let's do the same thing, but I want to do a bit of a buy or sell here, and I'll throw out some scenarios. You guys let me know how you feel about them. Let's start with the team the Commanders took to the grave and the coaching staff to the grave as well. For Detroit, is this the end? I'm going to ask you this. Is this the end of their Super Bowl window, Dan?
I'm going to sell because I love the team that they've created. I think there's just so much talent on this roster, and I think that the front office has earned a reputation for being one of the best in the league now. So I think that over the next few years, they're going to have a real opportunity to make the team even better. Having said that, I do think we need to acknowledge how difficult it is to sustain success in this league. I mean, Dan Campbell talked about it for the first time last year at the end of their loss to the 49ers, where he said to the media that he had just told his team in the locker room that this may have been their only chance. And I think a lot of us looked at that and we're like, that sounds weird. Like, you guys just got here. Like, you guys are just getting started. And again, the Lions were great again this year, which I think a lot of us expected. But as the year went on, I think we also kind of got a feel for what he was talking about there. Number one, it takes a lot of good fortune to make a deep playoff run in the NFL. The Lions did not have that this year. By the end of the season, injuries really tore apart the entire roster, especially on defense. But two, eventually, if you have built up this team, one, you're going to start losing guys on the roster to free agency and big contracts elsewhere. That hasn't happened yet. No. It is coming.
Those rookie contracts are coming up.
Exactly. But this year, like you mentioned, they're having that mass exodus of talent on the coaching staff, and that's really going to affect them going into the offseason. You have both coordinators leaving, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, two of the best coordinators in the NFL, now taking head coaching jobs. But they aren't the only ones either. It's a pretty standard practice that when coordinators leave, they're going to take assistants with them. So I believe that Mark Brunell is a candidate to be either an OC with the Jets or somewhere else in the league. I believe that Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach, who's been a huge part of what the Lions have done, he's a candidate to be the OC with Ben Johnson in Chicago. I think he's also interviewed for OC with the Seahawks. And defensive line coach Terrell Williams has already left to reunite with Mike Vrabel. Yep. He's going to be the defensive coordinator in New England. There are just so many coaches leaving right now that Dan Campbell has a huge task to kind of replenish the staff and rebuild what he put together there. And to his credit, these were all his hires. Like, he did this the first time, so he could do it again. And, you know, they're going to have candidates from within that they could promote to fill those jobs, and they're also going to have a lot of interest from outside the organization, more established guys that could come in and fill those jobs pretty seamlessly. But it's worth pointing out that it's not easy to, like, maintain the success, to kind of have the same hit rate that you did the first time around. I think we all remember Nick Sirianni's second chances at filling his coordinator staff. He lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon in the same offseason. His hires the second time around almost lost him his job. Not saying that's going to happen this time, but it's a lot easier said than done. So I am selling because I do believe in this team. I believe in Dan Campbell. I think that they could just keep it going for a couple more years, and I think that they could chase down that Super Bowl. But man, they have a lot of questions to answer this offseason. It's not going to be totally easy.
Yeah, they also have a little bit of wiggle room too, right? Like, I think the loss of the coordinators, maybe that cost them a couple games, but they were right up at the top of the league in terms of wins this year. I have a hard time believing this team isn't going to have double-digit wins for several years to come and continue to be all you need is a chip and a chair in the playoffs, and I think they're going to continue to be there.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree, and that's why I'm selling. That's why I think that they could still win a Super Bowl in the next few years, but they are in the best division in football, and one of those teams that took your offensive coordinator looks like it's going to be a whole lot better real soon. So that division's going to be crazy.
It's going to be an interesting decision for them between, do we bring in an outside voice to interrupt what probably a lot of guys in the roster say, you know, we know what we're doing, we know how we're built and what we're made of, or do you go internally and take the risk that obviously Sirianni took a couple of years ago? Now to the team that I think surprised a lot of us. We kind of expected them to be dead and gone in the Houston Texans. Boone. Well, the Houston Texans will make the AFC Championship game before the end of C.J. Stroud's rookie contract. So 3 seasons.
So you came up with this one. I've already told you off air. I thought this was a great question because it is so tough. Because initially, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, absolutely they're going to, right? They had a young, good quarterback, good coaching. Like, of course, they got some good pieces on offense like Nico Collins. The defense is good. But then you start to think about that conference, and you go, okay, they got to get by the Chiefs or the Bills or the Ravens. I think the Bengals are going to be a problem, even though they weren't this year. And what do those teams have in common? Great quarterbacks, right? Patrick Mahomes not going anywhere. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. I know they got past Justin Herbert this year, but I think the Chargers are going to continue to get better in the coming years. So I'm selling this one. I don't think they're going to get there. And I think it is going to be a team that is successful for a long time. I don't think we're going to see them in an AFC Championship game, though, in part because of how good the AFC is.
When you said those 3 teams, the Bills, Chiefs, and Ravens, and then once you said Cincinnati and LA, I'm like, yeah, that the AFC is in well positioned.
I will say it's worth pointing out though that like they gave the Chiefs a game this year, and I do think that I'm probably with you. Like the competition in the AFC is just so great that it's easier to bet on those teams to fill up the AFC title game every year than it is to bet on the Texans. But I do think that their path to taking that next step is pretty clear. Like the defense, I think, already set, great pass rushers, great back end. You're kind of just zeroing in your focus this offseason on that interior offensive line, grab another receiver, and some schematic things to clean up the issues in pass protection. But if they can do that, I think that they have a chance to be on par with those teams. But I would have to agree with you. Like, there's just so many good teams. It's not going to be easy, no matter how good they are.
It does look kind of a little bit like they get outcoached at times. You know, Bobby Slowick was lead candidate to be a head coach last year, and this year he didn't even make it his second interviews past the 93 guys that the Jets interviewed to be their head coach. And
the Jets.
There's a couple times where, you know, you're just kind of looking at them on the sidelines, and they're just, D'Amico Ryans is just, he's looking a little like kind of searching around to see what's going on, and I think that that's got to tighten up, like you said, schematically as well.
Ryans also gave a very short answer when reporters asked him about Slowick.
Yeah.
It was very, very brief, so I worry a little bit for Slowick.
Can somebody buy any of these takes I have? Can somebody buy? All right, here we go. This year was the Ravens' best chance to win the Super Bowl. Zach.
I am going to sell that one as well. Yeah, I'm still not buying. Tyler's having a rough day at the stock market. I think this was a really good chance for them to win a Super Bowl. I'm really against the kind of reactionary feeling that we have every time one of these quarterbacks loses a game. People want to write Lamar Jackson off now all of a sudden. He just lost the game. Like there's just only one team can win the game. Only two guys can make the AFC Championship. It didn't make me feel like the Ravens were bad. It just made me feel like they lost to a really good team. It goes back to the point you're saying. The AFC is absolutely stacked with all these great quarterbacks. It's going to be really tough to do that every year, but the Ravens have an incredible culture. They draft well. They sign the right guys. They always have the right coaches. They're going to be back in this same vein every single year. And, you know, we used to say, people are like, oh, Lamar can't get it done in the playoffs. We used to say that about Peyton Manning. We used to say that about John Elway. We used to say it about all these great guys until they win a Super Bowl and it gets rewritten. And it turns out that it just, sometimes you lose the game and that's how it goes. However, if I was going to buy, it would be because I'm not so sure about the longevity of the running quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I think it's something that we haven't seen, these guys that do it often. The last example we had was like Cam Newton, who was basically done in like his early 30s, right? And you could tell it was because of the physical toll that it took on them. So I'm very interested to see how Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, how much shorter their windows are. Like I think Mahomes will play till he's 40. Those guys, 32, 33, they might have a little bit of that running back syndrome. So I think the window's a little bit shorter, but I still think they'll win a Super Bowl eventually.
I think with that point, I maybe worry a little bit more about Josh Allen, though I think he's developed into a really good passer as well. But Lamar's a strong passer, and I think even if he does take away some of the rushing as
and both those guys are better passers than Cam Newton, right?
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm going with it. But I also think Lamar's pretty smart about the way that he runs, and I think he could dial it back even a little bit, but he's still a good enough passer to keep that offense going and just kind of pick his spots, even if he isn't running as much. So the Ravens have been good for how long? I think they're going to continue to be good. They'll be there every year.
All right, my last chance for somebody to buy. The Rams are, I think, one of the more underrated, fascinating storylines, I think, going into this offseason and the future. We just had the finalists announced for a bunch of the awards. Jared Verse and Braden Fisk were both finalists for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And offensively, I think this team's still in a good place as well. So I'm going to give you this one, Boone. Matthew Stafford plays 3 more NFL seasons.
I'm so sorry, man.
Oh, no.
We have to sell this.
Oh, this is a disaster.
I don't care what he says. I don't care what his wife says on her podcast. This guy is
I care for what she says for the record.
This guy's an old, about to be 37-year-old quarterback this year. And when you look at, like, in my injury docs, okay, I have 14 injury notes on him over the last 5 years. And I'm not going to rattle them all off, but it's like back and thumb and concussion, hip, toe, ankle. Like, there are so many injuries. I think he is an old quarterback for his age. I don't think there's any way this guy plays 3 more years. I think I would give him like 1 more year. I'm almost surprised he's not retiring after this season. I thought that was going to be a possibility. So I think we might see him play 1 more year, maybe 2. There's no way in my mind that this is the kind of quarterback that's going to play until he's 40 years old.
Was it last year that we started hearing like retirement could be a consideration type thing?
Yep.
Adding like 3-4 years on top of that, I think would be a tough.
I mean,
he's still good. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, agreed.
He's
ability-wise,
so
he
good.
could play, of course. Like, still a top, like,
the window
6,
kind of,
7
I feel like the
quarterback,
window's reopened for this team. Like they played well, they held their own in that game, had a chance. They had a chance to win it in the final minute.
And he's not a rushing quarterback. But going back to what you said about rushing quarterbacks and some of those guys that get hurt, with all these injuries that Stafford's had, he's played through so much. Go back to the Lions days, right? He would play through all those injuries. He has just been so banged up that I think that takes its toll. And I don't think he's going to be a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers playing into his 40s.
But I do think like he could be 62 and he'll just be slinging it.
The arm is still going to be there.
Yeah.
Their transition will be really interesting once he does retire. But speaking of transitions, let's get to the coaching side of things. There's been a
Wow! Oh
lot.
my God!
Yeah,
Tyler, what a host! What a host! That was beautiful.
There's been a lot in the coaching cycle since last week. So the first thing I want to get to is obviously the hire for Chicago and getting Ben Johnson. How do we feel about that, Dan?
I think Boone wants to talk about this more than
Once
I
a
do,
week,
but
once a week, we just get that mixed up a
but
little
honestly,
bit. Yeah, I really like this. I'm happy for, and I hope you didn't do that on purpose because Wilkie thought that the Raiders were going to get Ben Johnson last week. So you're just like driving it in one more time.
I take zero blame for that.
It looked like it was going that way. There were a lot of reports about it. And, I don't even know that it was so much what I suggested last week, which was a negotiating tactic. I think it was just maybe people in the Raiders organization were leaking that information and then it just didn't go their way. But regardless, I'm really happy for everybody in Chicago. I'm really happy for Caleb Williams and the team. Like, this is what they wanted. This is what Caleb said that he wanted. It was great to see him at the press conference, giving props to Ben Johnson being there. But this is why I'm really excited. Ben Johnson is the kind of coordinator. We don't know what kind of leader he is yet. I'm hopeful that he's going to be one of those, coaches that can lead an organization. But what we do know is he is a very good offensive mind. And he's not one of these like old school guys that just has his system and dumps it on and forces guys to play within it. He is going to go about this looking at what Caleb does well, looking at what Caleb likes, and building up from there. And he said just as much. We knew that before yesterday when they had the press conference. He said it in the press conference. That's exactly what they're going to do. In his words, they're going to tear it down to the studs and build it up from there. I'm really, really hopeful for what's going to happen with this team. And for what we saw from Caleb this year, up and down, for sure. Wasn't all great, wasn't all bad, but there were certainly moments where we saw that talent. We saw what he could be. I think that elite potential is there. I think he is going to be an elite quarterback with Ben Johnson as his offensive play caller. And look at what Jared Goff did, right? Like, without him and then with him. When Ben Johnson was his OC, it was basically like almost career years each season. It was equivalent or better to the numbers he was putting up with Sean McVay. And I think that's what the Bears have to hope here, that they got the next Sean McVay type coach, a guy that can be their offensive coordinator for a long, long time. And that's the move. We talked about it on the show before. That's why you go out and get one of these offensive minds and make them your head coach, because now they get to stick and build with your young QB. So it is going to be really exciting to see. Maybe, it was a false start on us to think that the Bears are going to be able to make the playoffs this season and have that kind of huge year in year one with Caleb. But now moving forward, it's going to be really good. And I think Caleb's going to be very soon up inside of that conversation as top 5, top 6 kind of quarterback in the league.
Yeah, this is such a big win for them because the reason why last week when we were all convinced, and it seemed like a lot of insiders were convinced that he was going to end up with the Raiders, was because there was this thought out there that he wanted a lot of control over the situation that he was stepping into, that he would prefer a situation where maybe he could bring his own GM. And we know in Chicago, he's stepping in with Ryan Poles, who's, I don't think any of us think that he's like real secure there. But for them to go out and get Ben Johnson anyway, the clear number one candidate in the cycle, I think that speaks to the overall optimism that there is for that organization from the league as a whole, but also just from Ben Johnson specifically, where he identified that job and he's like, I want to be a part of that. Big part of that is obviously Caleb Williams. I still think he's going to be the best quarterback from this rookie class, no matter how good Jaden Daniels has been. And I think that Ben Johnson coming aboard is only going to help him get there.
He's a genius offensive coordinator from the Mike Martz, Adam Gase coaching tree. What could go wrong?
That is the rub. There is, as much as we get excited about these like offensive minds, and we all like lean toward these offensive play callers, right? Like they're our favorite candidates. Of course, he should have been the number one candidate everywhere. Being a head coach is different, so there is the possibility that he's not quite up to that. But I think that this was a worthy bet to make.
The fact that it seems like so many quality coordinators want to be with him is huge, right? Like that's just such a positive for him. So that gives me a lot of hope too that this whole thing is just going to work out well.
Yeah, I think Dennis Allen's one of the best DCs you could find
He's
in
awesome.
this current cycle. The ramifications also, I think, of Ben Johnson making his decision. We're going to talk about Las Vegas, but I honestly also think that Trent Baalke lost his job because Ben Johnson kind of insinuated that he didn't love the situation there, and I would assume it was because of the GM who has a track record of helping a lot of coaches lose their job. If you remember, Jim Harbaugh lost his job in San Francisco working under him. But Las Vegas, where are they going now? Are there some candidates you have in mind, Dan, or you've heard about?
It seems like they're probably going to pivot to like a Pete Carroll type. I think they, after years of instability, even though he's older, they kind of want someone to come in and, let's say he only coaches there for 4 or 5 years. At least you could sell yourselves on the fact that he'll come in, he'll build a culture. Maybe he brings a successor with him. Personally, I think that they should be waiting out this weekend, see what happens in the Commanders game. I'd give Cliff Kingsbury another chance. We talk so much about Ben Johnson, how great he was, but in that game going head-to-head, Cliff Kingsbury was just as good, right? And, people don't love the past head coaching experience. Obviously, that's a negative on his resume, but...
How's Kyler Murray looked since he left town?
Exactly. I kind of look at that experience, especially for a guy who had his first head coaching experience when he was young. I'm like, okay, well, can he learn from this? It seems like his offense is a lot better than it was back then. He's not falling off in the second half of the season. It kind of seems like the second half drop-off was more about Kyler than it was Cliff. I guess Cliff has probably grown a bit too, but I just think that he's the type of guy who should be on that level of really sought-after offensive mind. I don't know that he would leave this season because he's still getting paid by the Cardinals, so he could just have some more fun in watching and drawing up plays and kind of have his stock grow even more over the years. But yeah, I know he's close with Tom Brady. They've been friends ever since they played with each other in New England, so that could be a fit. But I kind of expect it to be Pete Carroll at this point.
How does that make you feel, Boone? I don't feel too excited about a Pete Carroll hire.
I think, like I talked about Ben Johnson, we don't know if Ben Johnson's a good leader yet, but there's a possibility, right? It could be. I think we already saw this with Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think that he was that kind of leader, that kind of good coach. Was still a good offensive play caller when he was in Arizona. I just don't think he showed that he's like that guy that's going to inspire a team to be good. And I think that is so underrated. I talk about it a lot, but I think that is a huge part about being a head coach of a team. So yeah, maybe if he's going to spend less time like posing for Instagram shots in his house or whatever, maybe he'll spend more time and he'll be a better coach in his second chance. But he's not somebody that I really
look, it sounds like you just made the case for Pete Carroll, because that if there's one thing he does well, it's get the most out of all his teams and the players. So, and
you mentioned that he's old, and you said this the other day. He is young for his age, though, right? Like, he has a ton of energy for being a guy who's in his 70s, right?
Look, if you're hiring Pete Carroll, I think you need to have, like, a great staff around him. And maybe he could build that. Like, he has connections all over the league, all over college football as well, right? He could bring in, if he brings, like, Robert Saleh as his DC, who coached in Seattle, and he, like, goes outside of his coaching tree for, like, a Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator, then I'm in. But if he comes in and he hires, like, Shane Waldron as the OC and Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator, instant awful hire. So, like, this could go one of two ways. So we'll see.
Is your hope then, to finalize this, bottom line, as a Raiders fan, is your hope now that the Jags firing Baalke, Liam Cohen hasn't signed that offensive coordinator deal that the Bucs were going to give him and make him the highest paid OC. Maybe Liam Cohen reconsiders. Maybe Baalke was the reason he didn't go there. Liam Cohen goes to the Jags. Robert Saleh, now away from the Jags, ends up as the DC, and you get Pete Carroll as your head coach. And
so I like that we don't need to spend too much time talking about the Raiders, but just as far as the coaching carousel goes, I think we don't need to rule out Liam Cohen still taking a head coaching job. Again, of course, he stepped away from the Jags search to go back and get an extension with the Bucs, but that's not stopping the Jags from coming back in and saying, hey, like, we have a GM opening now. You could bring in, you maybe not want to give Liam Cohen his choice of GM, but at least someone he's more comfortable with than Trent Baalke. But also the Raiders just hired John Spytek away from the Bucs. Maybe they could make a connection there now that he's going to be involved in the coaching search. Maybe they could make a pitch to Liam Cohen to come there. So I think that he's probably still on the table as a head coaching candidate, but one to watch for sure. My preference would be a Kingsbury or Liam Cohen type, but Pete Carroll could work if it's the right staff. I'm just not convinced that he would bring the right staff.
All right, two more things we have left, the coaching side. I came on here last week and I said if the Dallas Cowboys are moving on from McCarthy, they've got to have grand plans. Maybe it's a Ben Johnson. I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. We got Brian Schottenheimer in for back-to-back days of in-person interviews. Were the Cowboys ready for this? Were they ready to move on? Were they ready to find a new coach?
They literally had no plan. There was no plan behind what they did. Brian Schottenheimer was already on the OC. Nobody was hiring him as a head coach to go somewhere else. If you wanted Brian Schottenheimer, you already had him. And Mike McCarthy, I know people don't like this. It's like there's like 5 really good coaches, and then there's like a bunch of stuff in the middle, and there's some really bad guys. Mike McCarthy is a decent head coach. He's got like almost 60% winning percentage, like over his time as the Cowboys head coach, and that roster has always been flawed. It's still flawed, and you're gonna bring in Brian Schottenheimer. There doesn't seem to be any heat to the Dion thing, so I don't think that's gonna happen. And the other option is like Kellen Moore that they're thinking of bringing back, which I'm not even opposed to Kellen Moore. I've always kind of liked him, but they just have no plan. And it just goes to show you that a lot of these teams, a lot of these coaching searches, it's like 2 or 3 years from now, we look, it's like 7 out of the 8 guys are fired or whatever. It's because these teams don't want to address the actual problems. The Cowboys don't want to address the problems. They fired McCarthy as a PR move. They don't want to fix their institutional issues, which is Jerry Jones every year wakes up and says, we want to win the Super Bowl, but doesn't want to do any of the work that goes into winning a Super Bowl, filling out a roster, drafting good players, building up a good infrastructure in your actual culture and organization. And this whole series is a complete farce. And he's going to get another little puppet to put on his marionette, and the Cowboys are going to falter again.
Here's what's going to happen. So Jerry Jones, what was that show called? The Landman or whatever that he did the acting job on recently?
Yeah.
Right? And it was
incredible.
Props to him.
Yeah.
It was a really good scene, and he was really good in it. Who else was in that scene with him? Billy Bob Thornton. And Billy Bob Thornton was the head coach in the Friday Night Lights movie.
Yeah.
Maybe he thinks he can get Billy Bob Thornton. Like, I don't know what they're doing. I'm with you. I talked about this maybe a month ago or so, that Jerry Jones is the problem. I said a lot of what you just said, and I don't think they have any sort of plan. And if it is Brian Schottenheimer, just close up shop. The Cowboys aren't making the playoffs next year. I'm selling all my Cowboys that I have in dynasty leagues. I don't want any part of that team if it's Schottenheimer. Let's hope that they have something else up their sleeve. I don't know what it is, though, at this point.
I don't think they do. And I may have said this to you last week when you brought up Ben Johnson. I can't remember if I did, but every time the Cowboys job is open, everyone thinks of all the biggest names we can in the league. Oh, who wouldn't want to coach America's team? Yeah. Well, one, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't because they get zero control because Jerry will never give that up. Also, he doesn't spend a lot of money on his coaches because he doesn't spend a lot of money on anything that he doesn't have to. He would be more content to have someone as among the lower paid coaches in the league come in, just coach the team while him and his son pick the players. I don't know why any top candidate would want to go there. He tends to just lean on familiarity, guys who know how the organization works. So, for years we heard, Sean Payton might make the move from New Orleans to Dallas. He used to be the OC there. Jerry loves him, and it never happened. And I think a big part of that is because Sean Payton would have wanted more control. So that's why guys like Brian Schottenheimer, Kellen Moore are the names that come up. And it seems like they don't expand the search much beyond that because they just stick where they're comfortable with. And it's a big reason why they don't ever take that next step is because they're not willing to go beyond that.
All right. We're gonna hurry things up here. I'm gonna give one statement, and it's gonna have to be to Zach because we had the legendary Jets rant from a couple weeks ago. How do we feel about Aaron Glenn?
My statement is just same old Jets. It's just same old Jets. They in their past head coaches, Herm Edwards, Eric Mangini, Rex Ryan, Todd Bowles, Robert Saleh. They pick the hottest defense in the league. They hire the head coach. They think it's going to be a culture change. They talk about that. It's not going to be a culture change. Woody Johnson is going to screw it all up. Aaron Glenn is going to be on the sidelines looking all confused. He doesn't know what to do. The quarterback's going to falter, and the Jets are going to be in exactly the same spot 3 or 4 years from now.
I'm way more hopeful about this.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think this was a huge hire.
You guys don't know the Jets like I know the Jets, and I promise you that is exactly what is going to happen.
I think Aaron Glenn, though, is a very exciting coaching candidate.
It doesn't matter who.
So you're saying it's just the infrastructure of the Jets is going to take it all down regardless.
It doesn't matter who the coach is, and the fact that they didn't hire an offensive coach, it just shows that this team has no foresight, no ability to do anything. They're by year 2, when the quarterback's struggling, Woody Johnson's going to come in and fire the offensive coordinator, and I could just go on and on. But that's what I have to say about it's same old Jets.
I know replacing a quarterback is very tough to do, and Aaron Rodgers, I think, is still a half decent quarterback. He's certainly not a bad quarterback by any means. But as a Bills fan, I know when they lost Stephon Diggs, it was like, okay, I know there was problems in the locker room, but man, he was such a good player. And then you see this year, it's like a weight lifted off their shoulders, and the team's playing so much better. Man, I look at the Jets and I'm like, they just got to get Aaron Rodgers out of there. Like, you just see it. It's almost like the Deshaun Watson thing with the Browns. Like, when Deshaun Watson gets hurt, all of a sudden, oh my God, Jameis is in there. And it's like almost fun watching the Browns play. I think that'll be a huge aspect. And there were reports that Aaron Glenn's open to Aaron Rodgers coming back again. I hope that's not the case. I would like to see Aaron Glenn get in there, get his hands on that defense, and then let's find a new quarterback. Let's make Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and some of these young stars happy, and let's build from there.
Just working
I'd
off
like
your
the Jets
point
to get relegated to the XFL.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what would
working
like
off
to
your
see.
point about how bad the organization is, I think that just makes me think how much of a home run they hit with this hire, because to me, he was like a top 2 or 3 candidate in this cycle. And
So
when
was
I was
Todd
looking,
Bowles. So was Robert Saleh. So was
well,
Rex
I mean,
Ryan.
we could
so
say
was
that
Eric
about
Mancini.
every coach that's gone everywhere. But like the main point is that they come into this, and I think we're all looking at that job as not being attractive, because you have reports about like the ownership children making
looking at Madden ratings
and not wanting to trade for guys for that reason, right? So I, as a head coach, would not want to go to the Jets. But Aaron Glenn's a guy who's familiar with the organization. He was drafted by them, I think, in '94, played 8 years for them, also went back as a personnel guy later when he was done his playing career. I think that that's a home run for them to be able to leverage that familiarity and get one of the top candidates in the cycle. Will it work out? I don't know. Like, we don't know that about any coaching candidate. We don't know that about Ben Johnson. But I think that they have at least made a good decision here. And I hope it works out for them.
Check back in a year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, trivia time. This is Jonah's thing, so we'll see how I do. But we've got 4 quarterbacks left in contention for a Super Bowl ring, and only one of them, Jalen Hurts, is the only one that wasn't drafted in the first round. So I've got the 10 most recent quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl that were not drafted in round 1.
10 most recent quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl who were not drafted in round 1.
Yes, starting quarterbacks. We can't pick any
win a
backups.
Super Bowl.
We can't pick any
Okay.
Chad Henneys. All right, we will start. I'll start with Boone.
Oh, no. This is going to be tough. Sorry, was there a year on it or no?
No, the last 10, most recent 10.
Just the last 10. Oh, man. Okay. Who am I forgetting here? We're going through Nick Foles.
Nick Foles.
A Sir Thomas Brady.
Tom Brady on the list, yes.
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson, correct. Those are our last 3.
The last 10.
Those are the most recent 3?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm probably going out on this one. Like Trent Dilfer. That was probably too old.
Trent Dilfer, not on the list.
No.
Ooh. Trent Dilfer was a first-round pick as well, I think.
Was he?
I think he was like he's like a top 10 pick or whatever. Mel Kiper was really upset about it. Why can't I think of more quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls recently? The Seahawks won one. The Steelers, Ravens, Eagles. I don't even know if I have a name.
Yeah.
Kurt Warner?
Kurt Warner, there you go.
Let's go.
I thought that was going to be too old.
Let's
Oh,
go.
No,
A
it
year
goes pretty
after
far
Trent
back.
Dilfer.
It goes
Oh,
pretty far back.
Brad Johnson.
Brad Johnson.
Whoo, Brad
Correct.
Johnson is a spicy one. Okay, let me think of defensive teams that have won Super Bowls. Who won a random Super Bowl? The Patriots just won like 19 Super Bowls in a row. They're the only team I can think of. Give me like 5 seconds in your head to come up with an answer here.
We got 5 left.
We need that music. Yeah.
And
we need-
there's a player in between Brad Johnson and Russell Wilson.
Brad Johnson and Russell. So the Bucks won. The Titans never won. They lost to the Rams.
Gotta have an answer.
I literally can't even think of anyone.
Give me a name.
Ben Roethlisberger, who got drafted in the first round.
After the first round.
One thing we are
might have a
missing, though, I
couple.
will say, Tyler, is the Jonah. We are
Yeah,
getting that,
I don't
yeah.
really love that because that happens too much to me.
Okay, I might have a couple. Drew Brees.
Drew Brees, correct.
He was like the 33rd overall pick or something.
Does it go
There's
back,
one more really quite obvious.
Does it go back this far? Jim McMahon.
No,
Doesn't go back that far.
it does not go back that far.
Okay.
He was close.
Who else we
Okay.
got?
So our remaining quarterbacks are 4 left. These were the 4 that were the farthest away. Brett Favre, Mark Rippon, Jeff Hostetler, and then the farthest away is Joe Theismann.
Oh.
My mistake.
You know
was,
what? That's
I
what
thought
I
you
got-
said the
I
last
got-
10 years, not the last 10 quarterbacks.
Yes.
That was my mistake. That's
Okay,
why I
that's
was like,
fair.
I didn't say Kurt Warner because I was like, I think that's too old. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Well done.
Not too bad. That's a win for Wilkie. How many are we at now?
He's up to 4 now.
Infinity.
I was really hoping Zachy could get me.
I know. I tried to
me
get
a
you
win.
another point. I tried to
So,
get you
throw
another
that
point.
on
And
the board.
really,
I'm sorry.
Zach and I have combined for my score. That asterisk
Yeah,
next to
yeah.
mine was a week I wasn't here, and he filled in for me.
That's a pretty good lead. 4-2 to still to 0.
I'm
This is
getting
only
on,
since
see
we
that
started
here.
keeping track.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm getting on
Talk about that.
Sporkle tomorrow. That's what I'm doing.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. We got one or two more until the Super Bowl. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe so you get more from us here, and we will see you guys on the next one.